My name is Peggy Gonzalez. I was 26 years old. I wasn't born unwanted. That would have been easier to explain. I was simply unnecessary. That role was reserved for me the moment my younger sister Marissa came along. She was the miracle, the light, the one my mother spoke about with softness in her voice and pride in her eyes. Everything she did was charming. Everything she failed at was someone else's fault, usually mine. Growing up, I learned the rules without anyone ever spelling them out. Marissa cried, and the house stopped. Marissa struggled, and the world bent to make it easier. If she succeeded, it was because she was gifted. If she failed, it was because someone, me, had interfered. I became the background noise in my own home. Present, but never seen. Useful, but never valued. When Marissa forgot her homework, I should have reminded her. When she failed a test, I must have distracted her. When she broke something, I probably provoked her. My mother never asked questions. She never needed proof. Marissa's word was enough. Mine never was. So I adapted. I stopped arguing. I stopped explaining. I learned that silence was safer than honesty. I worked harder than everyone else. I got good grades. I cleaned without being asked. I apologized automatically, even when I didn't understand what I'd done wrong. I thought if I made myself easy to live with, I'd earn my place. Instead, I made myself invisible. The night everything fell apart didn't feel dramatic at first. No thunder, no warning. Just another evening where tension hung in the air like it always did. Marissa came home late, slammed her backpack onto the floor, and burst into tears. I failed, she sobbed, her voice echoing through the living room. My mother was already rushing to her side, arms open, face full of concern. Oh, baby, what happened? Before I could even process what was going on, Marissa turned and pointed straight at me. She stresses me out, she said through tears. She's always watching me, judging me. I can't focus when she's around. I froze. I hadn't spoken to her all day. My mother's expression hardened instantly. Peggy, she snapped, like my name itself was an accusation. Why can't you just leave her alone? I started, my voice barely above a whisper. You never know when to stop, my mother cut in. You're always hovering, always causing problems. Something inside me twisted. I tried to explain. I always tried. I spoke calmly, carefully, like stepping through glass. I wasn't doing anything, I said. I've been in my room all evening. Marissa's face contorted, her voice rising. You're lying. And then she screamed it. You've ruined our lives. The words landed like a slap. I barely had time to react before my mother said it too, her voice cold, final. She's right. Everything would be easier if you weren't here. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not loudly, not visibly, but completely. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't beg them to take it back. I just nodded. I walked past them, down the hallway, into my room. My hands moved automatically. Backpack, clothes, laptop, the envelope of cash I'd hidden from tutoring gigs, money I'd earned quietly, just in case I ever needed to leave. They didn't follow me. They didn't ask where I was going. They didn't even look up. I stepped outside into the night, the door closing behind me with a soft click that felt louder than any scream. The air was cold, biting, but I didn't shiver. I felt numb, hollow, like the part of me that wanted to be loved had finally given up. I walked without a destination, just putting distance between myself and the house I had spent my entire life trying to earn a place in. I remember thinking how strange it was that leaving felt so quiet. No one ran after me. No one called my name. No one cared. I found a cheap motel and paid for a single night with shaking hands. The room smelled like old carpet and stale air. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall, wondering how my life had narrowed down to this. I had no degree, no connections, barely any money. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was never going back. I had spent my whole life being blamed, dismissed, and overlooked. If I was going to survive, I would have to build something from nothing. because no one was coming to save me. That night, alone in a room no one else wanted, I made a quiet promise to myself. If I had to disappear from their lives to matter, then I would become someone they'd never recognize again, and they would never get to decide my worth ever again. The first thing I learned after leaving was how loud silence could be. No doors slamming, no accusations flying across the room, no one sighing in disappointment just because I existed. At night, the quiet pressed against my ears so hard it almost hurt. I wasn't used to peace. I didn't know what to do with it. That first motel night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the small desk under a flickering yellow lamp, staring at my reflection in the dark window. I looked older than 26, tired, hollowed out, like someone who had been slowly erased and was only now noticing the outline of what was missing. By morning, panic crept in. I had one night paid for. After that, nothing. I checked my bank balance. $213. That was it. No safety net, no one to call. The realization hit me in waves, each one sharper than the last. I could almost hear my mother's voice in my head, telling me this was my fault too, that I'd never survive on my own. I refused to let that voice win. I packed up early and walked until I found a small cafe that smelled like burnt coffee and old pastries. I ordered the cheapest thing on the menu and claimed a corner table near an outlet. My laptop felt heavier than usual as I opened it, like it was carrying the weight of my entire future. Tutoring had always been the one thing I was good at. I'd helped classmates, neighbor kids, even Marissa when she bothered to ask. I searched every platform I could find, online tutoring sites, freelance boards, anything that didn't require credentials I didn't have. I set my rates embarrassingly low, not because I thought my time wasn't worth more, but because desperation doesn't negotiate. The first few days were brutal. Rejection emails, no responses. One potential client ghosted me halfway through a conversation. I lived off instant noodles and whatever snacks the cafe staff didn't mind me taking when they weren't looking. Eventually, one message came through, just one. A nervous parent, a stressed out student, a math test they were failing. I said yes immediately. That first session paid barely enough to cover dinner, but when it ended, I sat there staring at my screen like it had just handed me oxygen. It wasn't much, but it was proof. Proof that I could still be useful on my own terms. One session turned into two. Two turned into a handful. I rented a room in a shared apartment with 3 strangers who barely spoke to me. The walls were thin, the kitchen was always messy, but no one yelled. No one blamed me for their bad days. I locked my door at night and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. I worked constantly. Mornings, afternoons, late nights. I built spreadsheets, took notes, improved my explanations. I smiled through exhaustion during video calls and cried quietly when they ended. Every dollar felt like a small rebellion against the life I'd escaped. Months passed. My client list grew. Word spread. Parents recommended me to other parents. Students told their friends. Slowly, painfully, the numbers started to make sense. I moved into a tiny studio apartment, barely more than a box with a window, but it was mine. No one could kick me out. No one could tell me I didn't belong there. I bought a cheap secondhand couch and sat on it the first night, just breathing. I waited for the guilt to hit, for the sadness, for the instinct to call home and tell them I was okay. But my phone stayed silent. No birthday message, no holiday call, no, "Are you alive?" That hurt in a deep, old way. The kind of pain that doesn't scream, it just settles. I told myself I didn't care, that I was better off without them. Some days I even believed it. A year in, I realized something uncomfortable. I was exhausted. I was trading time for money, and there were only so many hours I could sell before my body gave out. I watched my calendar fill up weeks in advance and felt panic instead of pride. That's when the idea hit me. What if I stopped repeating myself? What if I turned everything I taught, every trick, every shortcut, every explanation, into something bigger. I spent nights watching free videos, reading articles, teaching myself marketing and course design. I barely slept. I poured every extra dollar into software and hosting. It was terrifying. One wrong move and I'd lose everything I'd built. But I was used to risk. My entire life had been a gamble. When I launched my SAT prep course, nothing happened. Then, one sale. Then two. I refreshed the page obsessively, heart racing every time the number changed. Students started leaving reviews. Messages came in thanking me, recommending me. And then, one morning, I woke up to triple the sales, then quadruple. I sat on the floor, laptop in my lap, hands shaking, trying to process it. It felt unreal, like someone else's life bleeding into mine. Within months, I moved again. This time into a high-rise apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view I used to dream about when I was a kid, lying awake in my childhood bedroom, wondering what it would feel like to matter. I traveled. I met people who listened when I spoke, people who respected me without needing to tear me down first. I built a life that didn't revolve around survival, and through all of it, my family never reached out, not once. Until the morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. 6 missed calls from my mother, 8 from Marissa. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, a strange mix of dread and anticipation twisting in my chest. After all this time, after they'd let me disappear like I never existed, they suddenly remembered my number. I knew exactly why. They didn't call to apologize. They called because they needed something. I let the phone ring again before finally picking up. "Hello?" I said, my voice calm, steady, unrecognizable even to myself. "Peggy," my mother's voice trembled. "Sweetheart, please, we need to talk." The words, after everything, after the silence, after the years they let swallow me whole, I knew this conversation would change everything. And I already had a feeling I wouldn't be the one begging this time. I didn't answer her right away, not because I didn't hear her, but because I needed a second to remind myself who I was now. "Peggy?" my mother said again, her voice tight, fragile in a way I didn't recognize. "Are you there?" "I'm here," I said finally. There was a pause. I could almost picture her sitting at the kitchen table, the same one where she used to correct Marissa's homework while telling me to be quiet. The same place where my mistakes were listed like evidence. We've fallen on hard times," she began. "Of course you have." Marissa's name came next. Trouble at school, tuition overdue, bills piling up, the same pattern wrapped in new packaging. I listened without interrupting, fingers tracing the edge of my desk, eyes fixed on the city stretching out beyond my windows. "We need your help," my mother said at last, the words tumbling out like they'd been rehearsed. "Just until we get back on our feet." "Help?" It was almost funny. "What kind of help?" I asked. There it was, the hitch in her breath, the hesitation. "Financial," she admitted. "Your sister's future is on the line." "Not mine. Never mine." I leaned back in my chair, feeling something strange bloom in my chest. Not guilt, not pity. Power. "You didn't need me before," I said quietly. "Why now?" "Peggy, please," she said. "We're your family." Family. The word felt foreign on her tongue. "You told me you'd be happier without me," I reminded her. "And you were, for years." She tried to apologize, sort of. Said things had been hard, that mistakes were made, that everyone was stressed back then. It was the same half acknowledgement she'd always used. Enough to sound regretful, never enough to take responsibility. "I'm not coming back," I said. The silence on the other end was thick. Then Marissa's voice cut in, frantic and shaking. "I know I was awful to you," she said quickly. "I didn't mean it. I was just young and scared. And now I don't know what to do." I closed my eyes. I had waited my whole life to hear her say something like that. I thought it would heal something. It didn't. "You figured it out when I was gone," I said. "You'll figure it out now." She cried. My mother begged. I ended the call with my heart racing, adrenaline coursing through me in a way I hadn't felt since the night I left. The calls didn't stop. Texts, voicemails, long messages dripping with desperation and carefully placed guilt. I didn't respond. I worked. I lived. I reminded myself that silence had once almost killed me, and now it was protecting me. Then one message made me pause. Please come home. I need you, not money, not help. Her. I stared at the words for a long time before typing my response. You had your chance. I'm done. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next evening, just as the sky darkened and the city lights flickered on, there was a knock at my door. Sharp, insistent. My stomach dropped. I checked the peephole and my breath caught. My mother, my father, Marissa, standing in the hallway like ghosts. They looked smaller somehow, tired, worn down. My father stared at the floor. Marissa wouldn't meet my eyes. My mother looked like she hadn't slept in days. I opened the door just enough to face them. What are you doing here? I asked. My mother stepped forward, hands trembling. Please, just hear us out. No, I said. You don't get to show up here. We don't know what else to do, she whispered. That's not my problem. Marissa finally looked up. Her eyes were red. I'm sorry, she said. I really am. I studied them. The family who had erased me, who had only remembered me when everything else fell apart. You didn't want me when I needed you, I said. You don't get me now. My mother reached for the doorframe. We're losing everything. You already did, I replied. I closed the door. For a moment, I leaned against it, heart pounding, the echoes of their voices bleeding through the wood. I hated how much it hurt. I hated how good it felt. Then I opened the door again. They looked up, hope flaring instantly. I crushed it. Go, I said. Fix your own mess. I closed the door for the last time and locked it. Weeks passed. No calls, no messages. My life went on. My business grew. My peace settled in, quietly, gently. And one night, as I stood at my window looking out at the city, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. I thought closing the door would be the end of it. For a while, it was. Days slipped into weeks, and the silence returned. But this time, it didn't feel like abandonment. It felt earned. I went back to my routine, back to building, back to the version of my life that belonged entirely to me. That was when Daniel noticed something was off. Daniel was my boyfriend. We'd been together a little over a year, long enough for him to know when I was pretending to be fine. We'd met through mutual friends after my business started taking off. He was steady, observant, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. One night, as we sat on my couch watching the city lights blink on, he reached for my hand. You don't have to carry this alone, he said gently. I hesitated. Family wasn't something I talked about. It felt messy, exposed. But something about the way he looked at me, no judgment, no pressure, made the words spill out. So I told him everything. About Marissa, about my mother, about the night I left with a backpack and no plan, about the phone calls, the begging, the knock at the door. Daniel didn't interrupt. When I finished, he exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath the entire time. They don't deserve you, he said simply. I wanted to believe that was the end of the story. It wasn't. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a notification I didn't recognize. Unknown number. The message was short. We need to talk about Daniel. My stomach tightened. I replied before I could stop myself. Who is this? The typing bubbles appeared immediately. This is Rachel, his ex. I stared at the screen, pulse roaring in my ears. Daniel had mentioned her once or twice. A relationship that ended badly, unresolved in ways he didn't like revisiting. I'd never met her, never spoken to her. I don't want to cause trouble, the next message read. But you should know the kind of family you're dealing with. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? I typed. Her response came with a screenshot. A message from my mother. Begging. Pleading. Offering something in return. She reached out to me, Rachel wrote. Asked if I could talk to Daniel. Said you'd changed. Said you were cold. Said you were tearing the family apart. I felt sick. Even after everything, after the door slammed, after I sent them away, They were still trying to reach me. Through him. Rachel's final message made my hands shake. She said if you didn't help them, she'd make sure you lost him too. The realization hit hard and fast. They hadn't come to my door for closure. They came for leverage. I showed Daniel the messages that night, watched his jaw tighten as he read every word. They crossed a line, he said quietly. No, I corrected. They never saw the line to begin with. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I made a decision. The next morning, I sent one final message to my mother. Contact me again, directly or indirectly, and I will take legal action. This is your only warning. There was no reply. Rachel never messaged again. And Daniel? He stayed. Not because I asked him to, but because he chose to. That was the difference. For the first time in my life, someone chose me without conditions. And as the weeks passed, as my life settled back into its rhythm, I understood the truth my family never would. Walking away wasn't cruelty, it was survival. Time has a strange way of revealing what really mattered. Weeks turned into months, and the chaos my family tried to drag back into my life slowly lost its grip. The fear faded first, then the anger. What remained was something quieter, clarity. I didn't hear from my mother again. No calls, no texts, no sudden appearances. Whether my warnings scared her or she finally ran out of people to manipulate, I didn't know. And for the first time, I didn't care to find out. Daniel and I settled into something solid. Not perfect, but real. He never pushed me to forgive, never asked me to explain myself twice. When I had nightmares about the past, he held me until they passed. When I questioned whether I'd been too harsh, he reminded me why boundaries existed in the first place. You didn't abandon them, he told me once. They abandoned you. You just stopped bleeding for it. That sentence stayed with me. My business kept growing. I hired a small team, expanded the course, watched emails pour in from students whose lives were changing because of something I'd built with my own hands. Every success felt earned, not stolen, not conditional. One afternoon, while sorting through old files on my laptop, I stumbled across a document from years ago, a personal statement draft I'd written in college. It was full of apologies, excuses, lines about wanting to be less of a burden. I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. The girl who wrote that no longer existed. Late one evening, as rain streaked down the windows of my apartment, my phone buzzed again. For half a second, my chest tightened out of old habit. But when I checked the screen, it wasn't my mother. It was an unknown number. The message was short. I hope you're okay. No name, no demand, no guilt. I stared at it, then blocked the number without responding. Because hope without accountability was just another trap. I stood by the window, city lights blurred by rain, and felt something I never thought I'd feel about my family. Nothing. No rage, no longing, no urge to fix what was never mine to repair. They had taught me one thing, even if they never meant to. Love that comes with conditions isn't love at all. I turned away from the window and walked back into my life, the one I chose, the one I built, the one no one could take from me. The door didn't just close that night, it stayed closed. And for the first time, that felt like peace.